This meeting to order. Today is Monday, August 4th, 2014. We're meeting for the purpose of the regular meeting of the Elmhurst City Council. I'm going to invite Ryan Kunst from Troop 82 Emmanuel Lutheran to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I ask you all rise. Ready when you are, Brian. Clerk Spencer, please call the roll to establish a quorum.
Gutenkopf. Here. Deuter.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Polumsky.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Hipskin. Absent. York. Absent. Levin.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Onquist.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner. Wagner.
Here.
12 present, 2 absent.
12 present, 2 absent. We have a quorum. On to agenda item number 2, receipt of written communications from the public. At this time, is there anybody who has any written communications? I invite you to bring them up here and give them to Clerk Spencer. She'll make sure that they get distributed. Very good, thank you. Anyone else? Any other written communications? Seeing none, we'll go on to the public forum portion of our meeting. This is an opportunity for anybody in the audience to address the dais on anything they so choose. We ask that out of respect for other people who want to speak and out of the meetings that, meeting that we're trying to accomplish this evening, that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. If you go over 3 minutes, I will give you a gentle reminder. At this time, Clerk Spencer, is there anybody who has signed up for public forum?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we'll start with Claude Pagash, 566 West Gladys.
Mr. Pagash, please approach the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
I had the opportunity a couple weeks ago to be at the Citizens Advocacy Group, and I left with one understanding. People that were there indicated that there is a complete difference between the reality of government and the illusion of government. They have no basis in common. I also think that permeates our government. City told us they hired Burke, finest engineer in the world. Comes up with a report. We sent it over to the Park District, and what do? They hired their own engineer. Such faith in government. No wonder they had so little. There are a couple things on the agenda. Residents' stormwater fee. Resident. Is the business community in this town considered a resident? Or do they have such a special right that they are not included in trying to solve some of our major problems? Interesting. Resident. We also have on the agenda Elmhurst compensatory policy. I have no idea what it's based on. I am hoping that it's based on reality, because there are numerous citizens, not only in this city, but throughout this country, that have a difficult time feeding and keeping a roof over their head. I would hate to see that this compensatory ordinance shows very special benefits to a few. One other thing, I guess. Mayor, a couple weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, you had a little commentary about the Fourth Estate. Yes, they are limited in the area they can produce a document in. But I would much prefer a paragraph from the Fourth Estate than the dead silence from our legislative body. For the people that come here can ask, can plead, and that is exactly what happened. They ask and plead, and there is no return on any information. And I ask myself, why? And I can only hope that the fourth estate is never eliminated. Thank you for your time.
Tamara Brenner, 137 North Caroline.
Tamara Brenner, 137 North Caroline. My major point for tonight is that I feel that the board docs online record management system is being significantly underutilized by the city. We, the citizens, taxpayers, paid for this system for record keeping so that we would be able to not have a bunch of paper floating around, even though one alderman in the DPZ committee not long ago said he wished everything could be on paper still. We paid for this system. It's actually really good in a lot of ways, but I think it could be utilized much more significantly than it has been so far. We have good stuff on agendas. We get all the agenda packets for the city council meetings and so forth, but there's a lot more that could be being done, and it doesn't seem to me like it would take that much more. Maybe it would. Maybe it takes more in the IT department. I don't know. For one thing, I saw one of my fellow residents just handed in a document to the city clerk for dissemination to the city. It's a public record. I would like to know what she submitted. How do I find that out? Do I have to submit a FOIA request every time I see one of my fellow residents get up and hand something to the city clerk? Or could those things please be posted on board docs so that anybody who wants to read it could just look it up? Similarly, we have committee meetings that are now, agendas are posted on the board docs. One thing about it, I noticed the time sometimes changes, specifically with a safety committee. Sometimes it meets at 3 in the afternoon instead of 7 at night. That's not highlighted anywhere. You got to just kind of find it. But even more significantly than that, there's not a lot of agenda items with materials attached to them on committee meetings. Last week's Public Affairs and Safety Committee had 4 items, and there was 1 item that had attached documentation. There were 2 items that I was kind of interested in, but I don't know anything about them. Shopping district trolley service. That might be a really good idea, or maybe not, I don't know, but there's no documentation about it. I have no idea what that's about or what the committee was going to be talking about. There's also a stop sign request that was discussed. I know there's documentation for that. It actually is on the agenda for tonight, but it wasn't on the agenda for last week. So if I wanted to participate or ask questions at the committee meeting, I would have had nothing to base it on. And in fact, segueing to that stop sign request, once again, it looks to me like the city's going to be putting in a stop sign that it probably doesn't need to. I looked through all the papers that I got available for the agenda tonight. I hope you guys all looked at the photograph at the very end, which shows that the yield sign seems to be obstructed by foliage, which could easily be trimmed, it seems. And it doesn't look to me like any of the criteria were met for putting a stop sign in, except for the fact that one of the aldermen wants it, which is how a lot of stop signs get put up in town. Anyway, I'd like to see greater utilization of board docs. It's a great system. Please use it maximally. Thanks.
Kevin Graff, 233 Cayuga.
My name's Kevin Graff, and I live at 233 Cayuga, and I'll be talking about the stormwater flooding issues in Elmhurst. I'm representing specifically 227, 233, and 237 Cayuga, as well as the other Cayuga residents who couldn't be here today. The flooding issues of Elmhurst need to be fixed for all residents. Nobody should flood. I'd like to set the record straight on a few things that were mentioned in an earlier meeting. The Downers Grove flooding issues were not solved by Washington Park or other detention basins. There is a 2013 Patch article on the back table, you're welcome to, stating that their detention basins overflowed. This is alarming proof that detention basins do overflow. Now you want to put one in backing up to my yard as well as many other Cayuga residents' homes. At these 3 addresses, we did not flood in any storm, not even in 1987. How do I know that? My wife and her family have lived on Cayuga since 1968, nearly 50 years. Over the past several months, the Cayuga residents have asked questions and raised concerns about this solution. Nobody from the city, Burke, or even our own 6th Ward aldermans have even attempted to contact me about these questions or concerns. In fairness, Mayor Morley did stop by one day while walking his dog, which was very nice. But a solution should not be put in residents in harm's way. It should not be moved into other areas to be an issue for other residences. I wouldn't want that on any of my Elmhurst residents. The real issue isn't the storms, it's our antiquated infrastructure for our sanitary and stormwater sewers. Why aren't we fixing these in rapid pace since 2010, or even earlier, since 2008? That's because it's expensive to do, and this so-called solution is cheaper. Burke's solution for York Commons still has 41 homes flooding on Washington during a 100-year storm at a cost of roughly $7 million. This is a Band-Aid solution which will be outgrown very quickly. You want to bring all that water into my backyard and my basement as that's where it will end up for me and many other Cayuga residents' homes when this overflows. Now you want the park and school districts to step up and to solve the infrastructure issues of Elmhurst. In the Burke plan, it states it will not fix all the flooding in Elmhurst. So why are we considering it? Because it's the cheapest solution. Lastly, I want to ask one simple question. Who is going to step up and take responsibility for the city of Elmhurst and guarantee me that we will not flood if this detention basin is put in and overflows? Is that the city of Elmhurst? Is that Mayor Morley? Is that the city manager? Anyone? All that tells me that you don't have faith in this plan and no one is willing to step up on the record for this. Let it be in the record that nobody is willing to step up for the city of Elmhurst and state to the Cayuga residents that we will not flood if this detention basin is put in at York Commons and overflows to our homes. Thank you.
Cheryl Jasek, 748 South Washington.
Thank you. Cheryl Jasek, 748 South Washington. I'm here to talk to you about flooding concerns, as many of the other residents are here tonight. In 2013, my house flooded, 6 months old, brand new sump pumps, 2 of them, 6 feet of water in my basement. So my basement is a retention pond for everybody here. It took us every bit of a year to get back on track between sanitizing our basement, cleaning what we could salvage, getting replacement for what couldn't be salvaged, as well as putting in our own fail-safes for how we can protect ourselves as our own, personal attempt at it. Thousands of dollars later, tens of thousands of dollars later, and a year's worth of effort, we're somewhat there. But the spring rains this year, the summer rains this year, every time it's on the radar, every time they're saying it's gonna rain hard, we're readjusting our schedule to be home for work. We're up all night. We're checking our basements, looking at 3 or 4 radars, because we don't know if we're safe. We don't know if what we've done is enough. We need the city's help. And to the Cayuga concerns, I know this isn't the only solution, and it's not the only one the city should do. It's the first of many. We have to do it. We have to move forward fast. This is the fastest way and the cheapest way to get us some relief now. We just need some relief now so that we don't have to lose sleep every night it rains. I'm texting my husband right now because there's rain in the forecast, and I hear people's phones going off because there's flood advisories. I'm not gonna sleep tonight because of that. We need some relief, but it can't be the only step we take. We have to continue to find solutions. These aren't 100-year storms anymore. They're every 3 or 4 years. And we don't know if they're gonna hit today, tomorrow, next year, or 100 years from now, but they're gonna hit, and we're all gonna be affected by it. We need your help. We need to push this forward. Please vote to do something. Thank you.
Andrew Zola, 732 South Washington.
Hi, thank you. Andrew Ziola, 732 South Washington. I'm going to echo the comments that have been said many times here. And we need relief for flooding mitigation, and we need tangible results now. I had 9 feet of water in my basement in 2013, and every night we're up watching the water just creep up, even for small storms, for 1 inch of rain. We need something done. There's no perfect slam dunk solution, but we'd like to see some momentum in one direction. Thank you.
Brian Doan, 472 East Adams.
Hello. I'll try not to say everything they all said. I was actually on the one of the committees for the stormwater. I was on the ComEd committee, and other than spend millions of dollars cutting down all the trees that are near the power lines, as far as the power goes, the power grid goes, there's really not a whole lot to do. And other than digging up Madison Street, since it's one of the only streets that goes from the east side of town to the west side of town, Butterfield, St. Charles, and these are all in the southern part of the town, and then just making one big drain pretty much under the whole street, we do need to find better alternatives than digging up our parks, than putting everybody's houses that are along the parks in those in jeopardy. And I had brought up, and I know this area that I'm going to talk about backs up to houses and everything, but it's not necessarily a park that's going to be affected. It's the prairie path. The prairie path goes from one side of the town to the other, and it more or less would catch the water coming from the northern side of town to probably the majority of these people, the southern part, which I live down on the south side of town. And it also has a pump at the far end, at the far west side of the prairie path to, if there is water that's going to go over the banks, if you dug from one end to the other, you could turn those pumps on, I would assume, and hopefully it wouldn't overrun its banks. I mean, the one thing we've all got to realize is that we can only pump so much water into the creek. If we could pump as much water as we wanted to, we wouldn't have a problem with the flooding we're having, because we would empty all the storm sewers and there'd be no problems. But we can't, because we would flood everyone to the south of us, Oak Brook and whatever else, wherever the creek goes. But we can't do that. And that's one thing that people really didn't quite understand, is that if we pumped out, say, 1 million gallons an hour, when we are only supposed to be pumping out 250,000 gallons an hour, that would cause havoc south of us. So we do need to come together as a city, because this is a major problem. I've been in my house for 18 years, and for about the first 11 to 12, I never had a problem. And now I've got a shed that I'm putting 2-3 bricks under every year to keep it from being underwater. It was almost up to my knee the last couple of years when we had a lot of rain. So we do need to come together as a city and figure this out. This isn't just going to go away, and it's going to cost everyone a lot, and we've got to understand that. Thank you.
Tracy Flesher, 736 South Washington.
Tracy Fleischer, 736 South Washington Street. First of all, I'd like to thank you for being here and all that you've done so far, and also for listening to us this evening. The first thing I'd like to say is that we have submitted our petition and also 16 pages of written comments that were generated from the petition. And basically this started as an idea on our Washington Street, basically just to see if we could get some residents on our block to ask the city to start moving. And it has turned into over 500 signatures throughout the town of Elmhurst. Each one of those people are asking you to find a resolution to our flooding problems. And again, we know that you have been working on this, and we thank you for everything that you've done. And again, there is also a page of, over 16 pages of comments as well. Many of us have flooded multiple times in these past 4 years. It has been extremely difficult to wait and continue flooding year after year, all the while the city is waiting, while we're waiting for the city to move forward with plans to mitigate the stormwater. Flooding is a town-wide problem. It affects everyone, whether they get water in their homes or not. From loss of possessions and costs of rebuilding to dropping property values and an overall bad reputation, these floods have literally cost Elmhurst residents millions of dollars. I've been told by the alderman by several aldermen and Mayor Morley, if I want to see changes, I need to come to meetings. Well, I'm here. and I've been coming to these meetings all summer. Many of the people in this room have been coming to these meetings for much longer than that. Tonight, I'm hoping to see that change start to happen. You will be asked to vote on agenda item 6.1, the 4 pilot projects for stormwater mitigation. I'm asking you, as a mother and wife who has given hours and hours of family time, to come to these meetings. As a resident who is tired of rebuilding my first floor, and when I say first floor, I mean taking every single thing that I own and throwing it away on my curb twice, once in 2010, once in 2013. And as a neighbor who is sickened by seeing friends throw out tens of thousands of dollars in addition to boxes and boxes of sentimental items, please vote yes and help us. We need your vote to get this project underway. And I'd also like to thank you on behalf of myself and my family, my neighbors, and everyone in this town who has been affected by flooding in some way or another. We'd like to thank you not only for your time, but also for your vote.
Mike B. Dunn, 907 Parkside.
Hi, Dan Beeden.
Oh, Dan B.
Thanks.
I'm sorry.
Hi.
That's
Hi,
correct.
good evening. Dan Beeden, 907 Parkside. I'm also here tonight to support the stormwater retention projects and encourage the council to move forward with intergovernmental agreements with the Park District and the school board. These are projects identified by the Burke Report as being able to significantly improve the flooding situation. We understand that a 2010 and 2013 problem or flood won't be solved by these activities. They'll be significantly improved. We also understand that if those projects go forward on a night like tonight, there's going to be people sitting in their homes feeling safe, not putting out sandbags like they are in southwest Elmhurst right now in anticipation of the storms that are coming through. So I've heard from both the Park District and the school district over the past month that they're willing to work with you guys and help with the flooding, but they're waiting for the city to initiate action here. So let's use this as an opportunity to move forward with these projects. Thank you.
Mike Baker, 432 East Park.
Mike Baker, 432 East Park. Tonight you have the opportunity to vote on another step of improving the quality of life in Elmhurst. The Stormwater Prioritization Report, you will consider if there is another way to continue to move forward on developing an infrastructure which can handle our all too frequent 100-year rains. Residents for 4 years have been coming to city council meetings, to board meetings, and to committee meetings, hoping to be heard and pleading for progress on this issue. It would appear that an affirmative vote on this issue would give some direction to the plan to handle the stormwater and the worst flooding areas in our town. I am thrilled for the residents that will benefit from this plan. This does represent the city taking a leadership role in this plan. I think that's important, but demands that we stay diligent in developing relationships with the other boards involved. I think how great it would be to use the $2 million in funds that we're looking at building an underpass and put it into flooding projects. And that's where I think our priorities need to be. The personnel resources and time used in this area would seem better used finding funding for stormwater projects throughout the city. Additionally, I hope when we begin that we have a specific set of criteria that we're looking at the results of these projects so we know which way to proceed once they're done. It would be somewhat obvious, of course, what results there are, but in an intergovernmental agreement, the key to success is that each group understands what goal you're shooting for, and I hope we have a reasonable set of goals. Of the 4 initial areas which are priorities, only 64% of the homes in those areas are going to benefit from this plan. I would think it would be wise to inform and instruct and teach the other 36% of the people what they should expect so that they're not surprised when these projects take off, if they do. These people will continue to wonder if the next rain is going to destroy their home and their furnishings if we don't. There's areas where the proposed plan would be 100% fixed for all residents involved in that particular area. The wait for that work for those people will be extremely challenging. So to finalize or to conclude, I would ask that the city continue to work with the schools and parks to accommodate their needs while remaining diligent in their quest to move the project forward. Thanks to the Public Works Committee for giving this the attention it deserves. I would ask you to be empathetic to the residents that continue to come and will continue to flood as these initial phases proceed. Hopefully, they will see the action in their areas in the not-too-distant future as well. So let's continue to move things forward by approving this report. With our concerted efforts by all the parties involved, hopefully, we can be the town that other cities will look to in the future for stormwater prevention in their municipalities.
Last person to sign in, Kathleen Sullivan, 133 Pine.
Good evening, Kathleen Sullivan, 133 Pine Street. You've certainly heard that this issue does have more than one side tonight, and this is actually your opportunity to vote and do something that satisfies multiple sides of an issue, because what the 4 pilot projects that have been proposed by the Public Works Committee in their committee report is to move from the conceptual phase of design where we're at now into the detailed design phase. So what you would do is be able to address any concerns that specific residents have as to what might happen in their specific neighborhoods, such as the residents in Cayuga have expressed. Those of us who flood are not asking for you to flood their homes either. None of us would expect that. We know how hard it is. And we don't think that the city council, the park district, or the schools, or the Burke engineers want to do that either. None of us wish for that to happen. What we want is for our homes to stop being used as de facto detention basins for the city of Elmhurst, because the storm sewer systems, as pointed out by others, do not currently hold the stormwater that it needs to hold. In the storms, I'll just do the brief highlights, which is we replace our furnace and our water heater every single time that our house is filled with water to within 1 foot and 1 inch of the bottom of the underlayment for our first floor. We fear that the next storm will hit over the first floor and destroy even more. We've moved many of our fragile valuables up to the second floor because we don't even, my husband doesn't want to take them out with a shovel. You've done a few things this year with regards to policies. For example, you've adopted some things with regards to compensatory storage, and those are good measures. And as these building policies persist in 25 years from now, it's going to be a different Elmhurst, and we won't be one that floods our neighbors. But just to put something in perspective is how much water enters my home. It would take 2,200 rain barrels to hold the water that fills my basement. That's 2,255-gallon barrels. That's 121,000 1-gallon bottles like you buy milk in at the store. So there's only, if you did the 4 people around me whose basements are of similar size, and you put one of those rain barrels at every house in Elmhurst, you still would barely cover those 4 basements. So this is why the big public works projects are needed, and not just the compensatory issues and the other small ways in which we can all continue to help. Also, it's not only that we want 100-year level of protection for everyone in Elmhurst, some of us don't even have 5 or 10-year level of protection for storms. So we have a chance that 1 out of every 5 years our houses are going to flood. And that's why these projects are needed. Additionally, Addison Creek is where the water drains for 1/3 of Elmhurst residents, not Salt Creek. So my home is in the Addison Creek area. So measures that are done in South Elmhurst and West Elmhurst don't necessarily help our homes. In addition, you talk a lot here at the city council level on a lot of things about business development, and one thing about business development is trying to attract new development. Well, one thing I've learned about business is that it's easier to keep what you have. So it's easier for you to try to keep us and retain us as residents. And we're relying upon you guys, on your leadership, to do so by approving this measure tonight. And we thank all of you for your efforts.
So that concludes public forum as as far as those that signed in.
Okay, that concludes public forum for this evening with regards to the folks who have signed in. Is there anybody who did not have an opportunity to sign in that wishes to address the council? Before I recognize you, please raise your hand so I can get an idea of how many people. So it looks like we have 3 additional people, and we'll start on my right, the lady in the glasses. If you want to address the council, that's fine. Just approach the microphone and state your name and address clearly, since we don't have it written down.
Eileen Kennedy, 184 East Cayuga. I have a few things that I would like to request of the city before they do any voting. First of all, I would like a response to the petition that we submitted to the city. We submitted a petition on July 18th. The Park District did respond kindly and did speak to us. We have received no response from the city of Elmhurst, our alderman or our mayor, so that's a little concerning to me. We would also have requested a meeting with the city, and we would like to have a meeting with the city, Burke Engineering, our alderman Jim Kennedy, and the Park District to discuss this, the stormwater retention span, specifically in the back corner of York Commons. We would also, to your point, I forget your name, but about the updating of the city's website, when you click on the stormwater retention link, the last update was 2011. You have to dig through Public Works to find anything. We would like our petition posted on that site, please. We would like all further meetings to be an open forum so that there are no closed meetings, so that we know everything that's going on. I think what happened here is last August we came in earnest, and we let you know that we flooded. You let us know Burke Engineering had not had that as part of the plan. We requested a look at Van Voorst Park or other retaining options for that particular part of Crescent. We walked away assuming that that was going to be done. Nothing was done with the Park District or the school board until Christmas time or around December. There was a lot about the Nitty development and taking Field School, and when you read through the notes, most of it was focused over there. So I feel like putting that all on the Park District and the school board as being negligent, and that's what's being said in the papers, and I don't know who's promoting that in the papers, isn't really fair to them. They had questions and concerns, and so if you had wanted them to vote on what was presented last August, they should have just voted then, and you could have been done. But the material that is out there right now is exactly what was presented last August, and they had questions then and concerns, and the city has done nothing to really address those as far as I can see by clicking on the stormwater litigation area. I would ask that you don't vote to put a retention pond behind over 20 homes where kids can jump off of the fence. Jim Kennedy mentioned at the last meeting, put a fence around it. Well, their backyard is only 20 feet deep. So there's 6 kids in one house. They can just jump off the fence and jump into the pond. I don't think that that's a safe place to do it. There's nobody that can see that area. So from a safety perspective, that's not a good idea. You claim that Washington Park is the ideal. Washington Park, and I'll leave these pictures, is surrounded by streets, not homes. There are 4 homes that abut to the retention pond. 4, not 20. And one of them abuts to a parking lot. One has a walkway between it. The other 2 are side lots with a good 20-plus feet before their homes. I probably will go and knock on their doors and see if they flooded when that overflowed. We also bought pictures of the overflow. It's not that we don't care about the flooding on Crescent. We didn't cause the flooding on Crescent. We all buried our downspouts. We were encouraged to do so by the city. Now they're saying don't do that. The city is giving mixed signals. The Burke Engineering Report, Part 2 and Part 3 of the Burke Engineering Report must be done. The pumps must be upgraded. There's a lot more money that needs to be spent for anything to really, truly work. So I think there's not a lot of transparency. You have to really dig through a lot of different notes in a lot of different places to figure out what's going on here. And that's concerning to me. I'd like it to be a lot more transparent. You know, we're all working people with families. We don't have time to dig through little pieces of your website to find the information. There is 130-acre storage that I read about in the plan. Can't we open that back up? There's 138 acre feet over by the Salt Creek that is not being utilized. Can that be used? Can Van Voorst Park be used to retain the water before it gets to Crescent? Can it go down? Can you buy up the homes on Crescent and put a retaining section there? Can you buy up part of the Rileys? That bank is gone now. Would they sell that to you? Could you put a retention pond there? There are a lot of other options than the one option that you've put out. There are many pilots, and I don't think piloting one that is so controversial is really the best option. I don't live backed up to the park. I live across the street. But I have serious concerns when you look at this, and I will leave these for you, the difference between Washington Park and that little triangle corner of your commons. Please post these on our petition on your website so others can read it. We didn't make a big website. We don't have 500 people from different states. We have 50 signatures from our street.
Ms. Kennedy, I'd ask
Thank
you to
you.
wrap it up. You're over your 3 minutes.
Okay.
Good evening. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. Tim Kennedy, 184 East Cayuga. I won't repeat much of what my wife said. I'll just echo it. A couple points I think the city should be aware of, and certainly the petition put that front and center. Cayuga is a flooded street. We have taken on, we have had homes flood. We've had neighbors suffer many of the same harm and anguish that others have spoken of tonight. The flooding problem in Elmhurst is a major concern of mine. However, none of the plans that I've seen reflect any stormwater drainage issues on Cayuga, of which there are many. Putting 136 acre feet of water from another area into the backyards of another street is not a solution. It's a Band-Aid, and as it's been mentioned earlier tonight, it's not an effective one. When you point to a park in Washington Park in Downers Grove as an exemplar, that's not a fair comparison. Elmhurst lacks park space, lacks open space. Putting in a detention pond with a barrier feet off of the property lines of many homes on Cayuga, less than 30 feet from the actual foundation, is a recipe for disaster. Washington Park in Downers Grove did overflow in 2013. There's been no guarantees that that wouldn't happen here. You're asking the park district and the school board to work with you in a partnership to put in these detention storage areas. It seems to me like you have a gun to their head. You had property at the Elmhurst Hospital available for detention. What happened? 55 houses are going there. Overcapacity is already an issue in Elmhurst. The field school is over capacity. There's going to be more capacity that they can handle, and yet you're asking them to work with you. It doesn't seem like a partnership to me. It seems like an ultimatum, and I think it's very unfair. So, thank you.
Looks like I'm the last speaker. My name is Peter Dabberton. I live at 177 East Cayuga Street. We're sympathetic. I live on Cayuga, and it does flood. That's the first thing. In fact, I was walking down the street when a house was for sale, and a couple was looking at the house, and they asked me, they said, "We understand this street has a serious problem with flooding. Is it true?" So there's a little anecdote showing you that word has gotten out. We have a problem with flooding. I can tell you a number of our neighbors have had water. It's also, I want to make it clear that at least I think all of us are sympathetic with the people who live on Washington that spoke tonight. And I believe the city should be spending money on flood mitigation as opposed to some of the other projects that I read about them doing, the underpass being one. But this doesn't mean that the retention pond is a good idea. And what I see is the city council has made up their mind, despite the fact that when people run for election, they'll say, well, I'm going to be the person who listens to people. I'm going to do what the citizens want. It seems to me there's almost a paternalistic approach where it's a number of people have made up their mind and they're going to press the park district and the school district to go ahead with this retention pond project, because you can go back and say, well, we did something about the flooding, but I don't think it's a very good solution. For our street, I think it's going to be a very bad solution because of the things that people before me have already mentioned. And I think that it would be wise to consider other alternatives. This is a controversial issue to put retention ponds in. As you can see, there's people who are very opposed to it. And I think that on my part, and speaking for them too, I think their concerns are real. And you have to wonder if you're going to create other problems by going ahead with this project. So I want you to consider that, and I certainly would appreciate that consideration. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else at this time who did not have an opportunity to speak that wishes to address the council? I see someone in the back.
Bridget Butterly. I live at 279 West Jackson, the corner of Jackson and Sailor. And I echo all the things that other people have said, and just encourage the council to vote tonight to move forward from the conceptual phase to the design phase, so we can start to answer some of these tough questions that people have brought forward. Elmhurst is a great place. I've lived here my whole life. My parents live in Washington, but not one block away from you guys, so. But we've had friends in our area move away. They're walk away. They've just walked away from their house because they just can't take it anymore. And it's sad. And it's a wonderful place to live. And as people said, it's a community-wide problem, whether you flood or not. So, just encourage the council again to move things forward. And as Kathleen said, thank you so much for the work you've done so far.
Very good. Anyone else?
I'm Elena Kasanovich. I live at 181 East Cayuga, and I just wanted to echo everything that everyone has said from Cayuga Street about our concerns regarding the flood mitigation behind our homes. The proposal that was put forth benefits 36 homes on Crescent, and there's 22 homes that could potentially flood as a result of putting a detention area 3 feet from our backyard. I wonder, with the costs and the effectiveness of putting such a thing for a benefit of maybe like a maximum of 15 homes. There is 29 acres that are behind our homes, and an additional 8, I think, that go to the front near the fire station. Could we maybe piecemeal that and start with the 8 acres and start with something small, away from people's homes, see how that works. That will alleviate the flooding problems on Washington. Their pipes tie into that. Can we go slowly and see what would happen? Because spending all that money and causing catastrophic damage to other people is really an issue that I would caution the city council to go forward with without really realizing what they're doing and having all the information. The Burke engineering report did not consider Cayuga to be a flooded street when they made their proposals. I would have somebody at least look at that again before proceeding with the back section that is against 3 feet off of property lines. And I would appreciate everyone just considering that and taking a second look. Thank you.
Okay, I think that wraps it up for public comment. Oh, yes.
Hi, my name is Kendra Thompson, and I live at 204 East.
Ms. Thompson, could you adjust the microphone so we can get you on audio there? Thanks.
I need a box. Again, I'm Kendra Thompson. I live at 204 East Crescent. I've lived there for 6 years now, and I have flooded twice, 2010 and 2013. In both of the incidences, I've had 4 feet of water in my backyard and 2+ feet in my basement. I do understand the concerns with Cayuga. My house is on the tracks, and I overlook and see those homes that are on the other side of the park. But my hope is that they understand right now this is all conceptual. There's been no design. I've spoken with our Alderman, Jim Kennedy, many times, and he's reassured us that with the design that will happen, residents' input will be taken seriously, and they will be considered in the Burke plan to work with you. So I hope that actually does happen, because, you know, I don't think Cayuga is the only residents that have concerns. We do as well on Crescent, and we hope that our houses will be saved by this York Commons plan. So that's all I want to say right now, but I appreciate the time you've taken to do this for the last 4 years, and I'm very excited that we've gotten at least to this point, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I believe there's someone else? Yes.
Dan Zakarski, 449 East Park. I want to say that I am definitely a proponent of the stormwater mitigation program and its first steps towards this. It's definitely going to take more than just this round to get things improved completely. What's been proposed in a couple locations is likely not even going to impact me. If it does, it's in a backhanded way, but I want to know that there is something happening, you know, to get us out of the trouble that we're in. I think a lot of the problems with the people that oppose this, there's misconceptions and they're misguided. And I think it's imperative that the city, the engineering department, its consultants, educate everybody better on what each one of these plans proposes, how it affects each one of the areas adversely or improves it. I think there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of words thrown around by people that are either for it or against it, that are used incorrectly, such as retention and detention. Those are two completely separate things. And I think that there's a lot of this that's just misunderstood, and I think the city needs to give everybody a better lesson on what each of these programs and initiatives is really all about. So, thank you.
Okay, yes. No, I need you. We record all of this, and the microphone helps with that.
Dawn Flynn, 195 Cayuga. I continue to remain impressed by the fact that this retention pond that's going to be, detention pond, excuse my language, that's going to be put behind Cayuga will not benefit the residents of Cayuga. Why is our water not going to be funneled into that detention pond that we're not going to benefit from if this is so important? And again, the number of families that are going to benefit from this in aggregate is very small. And I would agree that the entire town has a problem with water. And the people on Cayuga have the same problem that people on other streets do, and yet we are going to get no benefit from this, and our situation is going to be made worse.
Could you repeat your name? We didn't catch it when you...
Certainly. Dawn Flynn.
Dawn Flynn. Got it. Anyone else wishes to address the council at this time? Seeing none, that concludes the public forum portion of our meeting. On to agenda item number 4, announcements. Are there any announcements this evening from the dais? Alderman Palomsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to again invite everyone to attend a presentation by the Conservation Foundation, Sustainable Stormwater Solutions for Homeowners. It is tomorrow night, August 5th at 7 p.m. at Elmhurst Public Library, not a library-sponsored event. And a second announcement, I know we learned August 1st that ComEd has some additional responsibilities for reimbursing homeowners from some recent outages, and I was wondering if city staff has any information on that.
Address that in your report. Okay, go ahead.
I don't have any additional information tonight, but I'd be happy to get back to the council on that.
Okay, any other announcements? Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. 2 announcements. The first one, hopefully many residents already know this. but we have kicked off a pilot recycling program in downtown city of Elmhurst. So I encourage all residents to look for those recycling bins and utilize them appropriately, just like you would at your recycling bins at home. The second announcement is in regards to Pace bus service. I believe it was Route 309 that currently comes down North Avenue, down Berteau towards where the old hospital used to be. And that has been a work between myself and actually one of the residents contacted me, Vicky Bruno, along with the city and Pace to reroute that since there is no longer Elmhurst Hospital at that location. So we have been notified that on August 18th, that route will be changed. Happy to report, and that will go down North Avenue instead of going down the very narrow Berteau Avenue towards the no longer Elmhurst Hospital. So thank you very much.
Okay, any other announcements? Alderman Dunn.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. There is another community electronic recycling event taking place this Saturday, August 9th, from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Mary Queen of Heaven Church. That's located at 426 Northwest Avenue. Again, another recycling event, electronics recycling event this Saturday, 8 to 1 o'clock.
Okay. Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to let everyone know our communications team meetings with the parks and schools continue. Unfortunately, we had a meeting today that was canceled, so we look forward to finding a date in the very near future to get with those folks and continue progress after certainly our discussion here tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further announcements, we'll go on to agenda item number 5. This is the consent agenda. At this time, is there any alderman who wishes to have any item removed from the consent agenda for additional questions, comments? Anyone have an item that they wish to remove? Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 items, item number 5.6 and item number 5.9.
5.6. 5.9. Okay, anyone else have anything they'd like, wish to see removed from the consent agenda before I ask for approval? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda minus items 5.6 and 5.9. Motion to approve by Alderman Deuter, second by Alderman Levin. Clerk Spencer.
Deuter.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Polumsky.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hipskin, absent. York, absent. That's 12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays. That motion passes. Consent agenda is approved, minus agenda items 5.6 and 5.9. 5.6 is a report out of Public Works. Clerk Spencer, could you please read the recommendation?
It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Works and Buildings Committee that the Residential Stormwater Management Incentive Program, as outlined above, be approved. Signed by Jim Kennedy, Chairman, Chris Healy, Vice Chairman, Diane Gutenkopf, unsigned by Michael J. Bram.
Okay, to put this before the council, I will ask for a motion to approve the report and recommendation as read. Motion to approve by Alderman Kennedy, second by Alderman Healy. Chairman Kennedy, this is a report out of your committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will defer to Alderman Bram, who pulled the item.
Mr. Bram, you pulled this item. You have questions or comments?
Yes, sir. And it is a little bit awkward since this came from the committee that I sit on. I decided not to write a minority report on this issue, but I did not sign the report as written. My rationale for this is give a little bit of a history. Is that I do support the concept in regards to incentive to provide an incentive to have some private property owner on-site stormwater storage, be it rain harvesting, rain garden, etc. Down the line. The concern I have, and the reason why I didn't sign this report, was the dollar amount. What is being proposed, and it is a menu-based system, and I agree it should be, but what is being proposed is anything under 400 cubic feet, we would, as this report is written, would reimburse to what the city has an estimated cost of the full 100% cost of $8.50 per cubic feet, as an example for underground chamber as one of the stormwater management systems. If you go over 400 cubic feet, then it would be, again, in theory, from using the same example for underground chambers, would be 110%. So we would not only be paying for private property owners to manage stormwater on site, but we would be going above and beyond and paying 110% of the cost. So not only we're implementing it or paying for the total, well, proposed total cost, because there is a maximum city contribution limit of $5,000, so it could be capped at that. So long-winded way of saying that concept, I agree wholeheartedly. The cost and to the degree is where I have trouble. And the reason being is that the city's core duties, as we all know, are public safety, public infrastructure, finances, et cetera, down the line. In regards to public infrastructure, we should be maintaining a system that handles the capacity within the public setting, the public right-of-way. Yes, this would benefit the public right-of-way, the public infrastructure, from the standpoint of if people on their private property handle stormwater management, then there would be less going into the public system. But I just don't believe that the city should be paying up to 110%, greater than, again, in theory, greater than the total cost of some of these systems if you go over 400 cubic feet. That's where the sticking point is for me, and that's why I can't support this as written.
Okay. Any other comments? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do appreciate the alderman's position, but I think it's really important, especially that we say this now in the public forum that we have here, that we as a committee feel strongly that encouraging residents to store as much stormwater on site is prudent and is financially responsible. I think that by adding an additional incentive for people who build more stormwater storage on their own property above and beyond what they're required to store based on construction on their home site will be the only kind of a carrot that will encourage people to do more. And that's really what we're trying to do here, is to create carrots that encourage people to store as much stormwater as they can reasonably do it. And if they're willing to build a slightly larger containment system on their property, then we should be rewarding that. And I totally support it. I think that we have to recognize how heavily developed the urban environment that we live in truly is, and that by seeking solutions where we can, we're going to do as much as possible to help alleviate stormwater further down the line. So the more stormwater we can contain on the site where it falls, the better off we all are. And that's why I support going above and beyond, creating an additional carrot to help people add more storage than they're going to be required to by city ordinance.
Okay. Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Alderman Gutenkopf. I'll add a few additional comments. Where this originally came from, when we first started discussing this as a committee, and we had 3 or 4 different nights where we discussed this originally started off as a incentive for a builder who, after they ran a property through the NRCS formula to figure out how much compensatory storage they needed, the committee wanted to create an incentive to those builders who had to do zero. So they were putting up a new home, and for one reason or the other, the NRCS formula said zero. You have to do nothing to hold water on site. So the committee felt at that time that it was important that we give that builder an incentive to do something better than zero. So that was where the idea of an incentive or the 110% came in, so that we wanted them to do something big. We wanted them to do something that they really had to work to get. For example, if they had to do 100 cubic feet and to do 150, that's a different cost structure for a builder than if they had to do 100. The NRCS required of them to do 100 cubic feet, and then they wanted to go to 500. That's a different conversation. So we wanted them to think big. We wanted to give them the incentive to do that. Along the line, and it was, I believe, Alderman Gutenkopf who raised the point, she said, hey, if what we're doing is adding storage to the system of Elmhurst. So as we've talked before for different programs, we only have finite amount of space in town to use, whether it's public or private. We need to be smart and try to do everything we can to utilize every square foot of land. So as Alderman Gutenkopf suggested, well, if somebody wants to do something in their house that helps keep water on site, isn't that a benefit to the city? And we as a committee said, yeah, that's a benefit. So that's where the policy then expanded from just new construction to the point where the policy is at now that says anybody that wants to add additional stormwater capacity to their property will help fund. That's where the cap came in at 5,000. That's where the below 400 cubic feet, above 200 feet, and then the idea of an incentive still applied, as Alderman Gutenkopf just suggested, for private property like it did for a new construction going up. We wanted to create an incentive for a homeowner, a builder, to really go above and beyond, to really add 400 feet. So that's kind of the genesis of where the policy came from, and I'm in full support of it. I think, as I've said many times, we need to do everything we can to not only think about managing water differently, but we need to do as much as we can to keep water on site, and I think this policy helps get us there, along with everything else we've done to this point. So I'd ask for your support. Thank you.
Any other comments? Alderman Dunn.
Just a couple questions. The first one is, I'm not sure how far the Nitty development is in the officiality of their stormwater management approach, but I recall that their plan was to put an underground tank in the back of each property owner's home. Do they have an opportunity to recoup this possible $5,000 per home?
Interesting question.
I can take that.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple points, and Alderman Bram rightfully mentioned that they did not specifically say they were going to put tanks in. That was one of the things they're thinking about. They definitely have said they're going to do something on every site, could be a permeable paver driveway or a tank, both of which would fall under this policy. However, as part of our agreement with Nitty, and it was specifically written into the agreement with Nitty, that when we gave them the right-of-way for Avon, I believe, that they would not be eligible for any of this money. So they got the land. This was part of that, and we knew this policy was coming, so we specifically put in that agreement, Nitty would not be eligible for any of these incentives because of the land we gave them. That was part of the agreement.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. I think that was important. The other question I have is, near the end of the report, there's mention at the time of sale of a property that an inspection would be required, and I'm wondering what would be the specifics of that. If the system was not operating properly at the time, would that homeowner have to reimburse the city? It could be an impediment to selling a home, and you might do that 20 years from now. So if you could just talk to what the intent of that approach is.
Alderman Dunn, I can answer that. Basically, if the city's going to pay for an incentive and someone's going to store on site, much like when we inspect the home to make sure that their sump pumps are connected correctly, the city will keep a record of all of these projects, and that project will follow for the life of the home. And when that home's up for sale, if there was a 300 cubic foot rain garden put in place, the expectation is that's maintained, and if not, they will be expected to correct it before they sell it. So that is definitely discussed in committee, and the city intends to track that, and that will be part of it.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Is that a yes? Alderman Bram.
Thank you. I guess where it comes from, the disagreement with my colleagues on the committee is from a standpoint of how do we define incentive? How do we encourage a resident to do this, is some of the terms that have been used. How big is that carrot? How much will we help fund? Again, this is private property. We, as a city, and Alderman Dunn rightfully pointed it out, and we did have a detailed discussion on that during our committee discussion on this topic, of what would occur if whatever the stormwater management system was utilized was no longer in place or wasn't functioning at the time of sale. Well, that could be 2 years, that could be 10 years, that could be 30 years, what have you. I don't know. The problem being is private property. The city, other than this one check at a time of sale of a home, has no real way to make sure these systems are being maintained. We do have a real way to maintain the stormwater sewers that run throughout the city of Elmhurst. I personally think that's where the majority of the dollars should be going. It's been mentioned to me on other topics of, well, if you're bringing, well, I'll even say it, if you're increasing resurfacing, where's those dollars coming from? Because we would have to take away from another program. Albeit insignificant, as proposed, a new budget line item would be $50,000 per year, but where are those dollars coming from? Some of the discussion was, well, we already budgeted a few $1 million as stormwater management. Well, those are the projects that we'll be talking about later tonight. That wasn't in regards to anything like this. Again, the grand scheme of things, very insignificant, $50,000 compared to many millions of dollars, but it's still conceptually the same statement. So I would like to make a motion to amend at this time to have all the dollar amounts reduced from 100% for under 400 cubic feet to 50% in the spirit of compromise, to at least have a significant contribution from the city, but not 100% level, and then over 400 cubic feet go to 70%. And then the last part of the amendment, proposed amendment, would be a maximum city contribution from $5,000 to $4,000.
Alderman Bram, would you like to submit that amendment with corrections on the?
If you ignore my other notes on it, sure.
I'd love to ignore your other notes, but I
pretty
don't want to get the
basic.
I don't want to get the motion wrong. We've had challenges in the past, so.
Okay, it's essentially 50% or 70%.
What we got?
So
Oh, look at that.
50% of this amount, 70% of this amount, same thing for each of
So
them.
all of this,
And then $4,000. And then I think the only other area would be, this would need to be the 70%.
What about this?
Oh, $4,000, yeah.
That. No,
That-
that
that
will
would stay the
change.
same.
This you want to change to 4,000.
That is correct.
1 second, don't leave, let me make sure I got this right. That,
And then the table.
change the table. Right now, is this 100%?
Right. Under 400 cubic feet is 100%.
Can I ignore this note?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna do the basic math, but
I'm choosing to ignore it. But wait. So this is 100% and this is 110. You want to change it to 50 and 70.
correct, sir.
Okay. All right. Alderman Bram has submitted his motion to amend in writing. Alderman, on the dais, if you have the report in front of you or in front of you on the computer, there is a motion to amend the report, amending in the 5th paragraph, looks like second sentence, 4th line, change 110 to 70. In the, looks like 3rd sentence, 5th line, amend 5,000 to 4,000. Clerk Spencer, I'll give you a copy of this when I'm done. Then, on the chart, on page 2, if you look at the top, motion to amend underground chamber under city contribution, says $8.50 and $9.35 at 110%. For every item under city contribution, Alderman Bram is proposing in his amendment that the first item listed under 400 feet get funded at 50%. Right now, the report calls for 100. The second item of items over 400 cubic feet, right now that's proposed to fund at 110%. Alderman Bram's motion to amend is asking for a funding of 70%. So every city contribution in the box, first would be funded at 50%, second would be at 70%. If you follow that down to concrete vault, first would be 50%, second would be 70%, and so on all the way down. Also, the motion includes maximum contribution at the bottom of that chart to be reduced from 5,000 to 4,000, and that is it. That is the motion. Alderman Bram, is that a fair summation of your motion?
That is accurate, sir.
Wonderful. Do we have a second for that motion? Motion fails for not achieving a second. Appreciate the effort, Alderman Bram. Back to the motion before us. Any other comments as it relates to this report? Seeing none, I'll ask Clerk Spencer to please call the roll. Could we pass that?
Kennedy.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Onquist.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Goiter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Palumski.
Aye.
Graham.
No.
Pipskin, absent. York, absent. Levin.
Aye.
11 ayes, 1 nays.
11 ayes, 1 nay.
Absent.
I'm sorry, didn't mean to step on you there, Clerk Spencer. 11 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries. Report 5.6 out of Public Works is approved. On to agenda item number 5.9. This was also pulled. This is also, oh no, this is a report out of Public Affairs and Safety. Clerk Spencer, would you please read the recommendation?
It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Affairs and Safety Committee that the city attorney be authorized to draft the appropriate ordinance for the installation of stop signs at the neighborhood and southbound, stop signs at the northbound and southbound approaches to the intersection of Prospect and Eggleston Avenues. Signed by Patrick Wagner, Chairman, Norman Leader, Vice Chairman, unsigned by Michael Honquist.
Okay, to put this before the council, I will entertain a motion to approve the report and recommendation as read. Motion to approve by Alderman Wagner, second by Alderman Healy. Alderman Wagner, this is your report. Do you care to fill us in?
Sure. First, I'd like to defer to Alderman Bram, who pulled it.
Okay. Alderman Bram, you pulled this report. You have questions or comments?
Thank you, sir. This request obviously is for stop signs at Eggleston and Prospect. My concerns were, according to what I've seen from the data provided, sorry, I'm looking at stormwater management in front of me. From the data provided, it doesn't seem to meet the MUTCD criteria. And I also believe that this intersection was reviewed as part of a, I think it was Eggleston corridor review from Argyle to York Road a few years back, and I don't have the exact date for that. I was hoping the committee could speak to what was the change when that study was done, and there wasn't a recommendation to change yield signs to stop signs at that point in time, compared to today, when the recommendation is to change from yield signs to stop signs. So that was the two main questions. The criteria aspect, it doesn't seem, to me at least, that it meets the MUTCD. I do understand that there's been one accident recently in May, but the line of sight is either acceptable or even better than what's stated from the box threshold in previous years. So the criteria doesn't seem to be there, the line of sight doesn't seem to be an issue, and a previous study didn't warrant a change, so why today would it warrant a change?
Chairman Wagner, would you Care to fill us in?
I don't know if I can help Alderman Bram and answer his question, but all I can say is that the recommendation came to us from from a referral from Alderman Healy to city staff. It's a couple months old. The Elmhurst Police Department put some patrols. Did notice a lot of speeding, was able to control the speeding a little bit by being visible. There was that accident that Alderman Brand alluded to. I don't know the answer about the Argyle corridor question. Alderman Brand, I apologize, but it wasn't discussed, but it was highly recommended from city staff and the Elmhurst Police Department to make the change. So we agreed with that census.
Alderman Brand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a follow-up, especially because we have numerous people in the audience. I did go on site to speak with some of the residents and visually look at this intersection myself. And I will tell you that I'm kind of on the fence on this one because as I sat there and watched traffic go through this intersection, there were people who drove right through the yield signs, not slowing down, not even looking, making an assumption that there was no traffic. And thankfully, it was actually the one of them was the individual who lived on that corner, was aware to not trust anybody to obey the yield sign and took appropriate measures and slowed down and avoided a potential car accident there. But usually the MUTCD states in regards to crash history, and the crash history is, other than the accident, and I'm not trivializing by any stretch of the imagination, I'm not trivializing any accident. Any accident is a bad accident, in my opinion. But just going from what they've stated is that it's on a low count in regards to criteria, what the MUTCD states. And what I wanted to clarify is that stop signs are not and never will be meant for speed control. It states that in the MUTCD multiple times, one-line sentence. But even as I say that, the data that shows here is that there is no speeding issue, and it could be from the enforcement that happened potentially before that. So I guess I'm just on the fence because it does seem to be potentially dangerous just from even what I witnessed and the one crash, even though it doesn't meet criteria. The real issue, though, is there was an Eggleston corridor study a few years ago, and I was hoping that something significant changed within that time period, why all of a sudden there's a different recommendation compared to no recommendation during that study. Thank you.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm going to read directly from Coulter Transportation Consulting's report submitted by Brent Coulter, who has been, I think as everybody knows, has been our traffic expert, who is an expert in the MUTCD, and somebody that on several occasions aldermen on this dais have referred to and relied upon for their opinions on various traffic matters. Recommendation: on the basis of the recent crash history involving failure to yield in the north-south direction on Prospect Avenue, currently controlled by yield signs, and in recognition of the potential for Prospect Avenue to attract, quote, cut-through, unquote, traffic during peak rush hours, I am recommending the following. Existing yield signs on Prospect Avenue be replaced by stop signs, tree foliage on both approaches, but in particular the northwest approach on Prospect, the northbound approach on Prospect should be trimmed to maintain traffic control sign visibility. So, as Chairman Wagner said, it had police department support, city staff support, and now our expert on transportation. This wasn't, it was my referral, but it wasn't because I wanted it. All the experts are saying replacing the yields with stop signs is warranted. So I think the report makes a lot of sense, and I'd ask for everybody's vote. Thank you.
Okay. Clerk Spencer, please call the roll.
Wagner.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Polumsky.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hipskin, absent. York, absent. Levin.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Report, recommendation is approved. That concludes items pulled from the consent agenda. On to agenda item number 6, individual committee report. 6.1, we have a committee report out of Public Works and Building Committee. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask that you read the recommendation.
It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Works and Buildings Committee that the action plan for stormwater project prioritization as outlined above be approved, and that the city manager and/or mayor be authorized to prepare a formal request to District 205 and the Park District for timely commitment to the identified pilot projects. Signed by Jim Kennedy, Chairman, Chris Healy, Vice Chairman, Diane Gutenkoff, unsigned by Michael J. Brand.
Okay, to put this before the council, I will ask for a motion to approve the report and recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman Kennedy, second by Alderman Healy. Your report, Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to start by talking about how we got here. In 2010, we had 2 storms, obviously in June and July, very significant. Lots of people out in the audience were people that were directly affected by those storms. Shortly thereafter, we engaged to find an engineering firm. We selected Burke Engineering in the fall of that year, and then they went to work and ultimately presented to us a report, a study, and a plan moving forward in April of 2012. As that came before the council and ultimately went before Public Works, we looked at 3 areas of challenge: sanitary, the stormwater policies that are out there, and then projects to improve the issues related to overland flooding and the greater subject of stormwater. From the sanitary side, we looked at that as the #1 issue because that is about as bad as it gets when your home has raw sewage in it. And so the projects we've undertaken are those like the Southwest Elmhurst wet weather facility. That's going to have significant impact on on Southwest Elmhurst. We increased the funding shortly after those storms for overhead sewer funding for overhead sewer projects, of which a number of residents throughout Elmhurst use those funds to better their homes and eliminate that problem. We also engage with RJN, who has done studies, smoke testing, and a number of different techniques, also in Southwest Elmhurst, on the most impacted basins, and ultimately be working to eliminate the INI. Again, this was the #1 thing, and if that was your problem in your area, you were pretty happy we were working on it. The second thing we did as a committee was we wanted to make sure that we took measures to improve the situation as it related to new homes going in and to any home that was going to have an addition or some improvement done to it. So as Alderman Healy pointed out, we've done a number of policies as it related to compensatory storage, not only for new homes, but for additions, and then certainly tonight, putting together an incentive program to have people go above and beyond. We also recently put in place a fee in lieu of program, so if there's an individual who cannot store to the requirement of the NCS, did I get that right? NRCS, thank you. They would pay the amount of money outlined in that process, and we would take that money ultimately to make improvements. Lastly, we made improvements to the rear yard drain program and direct connections, because ultimately there are people that are negatively impacted by that, so we put improvements together for that. So as we come to things, we've taken significant effort in those first 2 areas, and now we're talking about stormwater projects. Late fall of last year, actually summer of last year, there was a presentation given to both Parks and Schools where preliminary engineering from the Burke report was shown to them. In the fall of last year, we started our communications meetings, and part of that effort is to ultimately, what we're talking about tonight, is getting to the point where we as a council feel that we are in support of moving forward with 4 pilot projects, and ultimately asking the parks and the schools to assist us in improving a situation that affects all of our residents in Elmhurst. We know that putting water in detention areas in the parks and schools is not the only option. If you look at the report written, we talk about things that we're gonna do as a city, things we're gonna try and partner with the county, but we know, as we look at these things, we're trying to do the most amount of good for the most amount of people in the shortest amount of time at the best possible cost. Very important to understand that. We're looking to try and do things at the best possible cost. If ultimately the parks and the schools do not believe that they can participate, then we need to go off and look at something else to try and address this situation. Because I feel, and I think the committee feels, we as a city have a responsibility to keep overland flooding, that water, off of residential property. We need to handle it appropriately. We may not be able to in all cases, and certainly the things that we're talking about here will be built to a standard, whatever we agree to, that Mother Nature can exceed should she decide to. So we know we're gonna make improvements, but this will not, quote unquote, fix all of the problems going forward. So as the communication committee move forward, we've identified the 4 projects that we've seen today. In the report, you'll see we talk about the number of homes that are affected, the cost per home, and some of the logistics behind each one of those. The 4 projects that were selected were those ones on the side of the parks and the schools that they felt they could get their arms around most easily, and the projects related to the schools are ones that aren't currently encumbered by some other situation. So in the case of Madison School, there's nothing that says right now that we couldn't do a project there. There may be some improvements and some expansion that could happen on that site, but to put 4 or 5 acre feet into that area could be done today. If they expand and they wanted to move into that area, they certainly could, but we would still have a stormwater piece to that. As we look at these areas, our main goal is to improve the flooding in those areas, but also to keep or improve the playability of the parks and the school open areas compared to where they are today. I think anybody who has used the parks understands that we lose a lot of days for games, be it soccer or baseball or whatever, due to many of the parks not draining properly. If we can do something where we create detention areas and improve that, I think that's a win-win. As it relates to areas like Cayuga or any other area that's going to abut any one of these projects, it behooves us, and it'll be our requirement, to make sure we don't create a problem in one area and move it to another. And so what all of us have seen initially have been conceptual drawings, very basic drawings, because we as a city wanted to get that information out in front of the parks and the schools, but not undertake such an amount of money as to waste it should those entities not want to go in that direction. So by us coming together as a council, supporting this issue, we will then, with our partners in the parks and the schools, undertake that additional engineering work so that we have detailed plans, detailed requirements, and ultimately intergovernmental agreements to go forward and design and build these areas that are going to be an improvement to the areas and certainly not be a detriment to any one other area adjacent to those. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Additional comments? Alderman Palomsky?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Alderman Kennedy. I believe all the concerns have been addressed.
Alderman Palomsky, could I ask you to pull your microphone a little closer?
Absolutely. I think the important points have all been addressed, and we've heard a lot of concerns tonight. And I think some that might be related to how one improvement might negatively affect someone else will be addressed if we get to the point beyond the conceptual drawings. I think that we owe it to our community and to the community to come after us to move forward with these projects, and our decision to commit to them is as critical to Elmhurst as the decisions once required to form a police department or to develop the underpass at Palmer Drive. And now is the time for our council's critical decision. As Alderman Kennedy pointed out, related to the parks, for anybody who's concerned about how this could affect the parks, it's imperative to know that the targeted areas of the parks that we're talking about were not originally engineered to serve as playing fields, yet they are now. And that the projects are designed to not only temporarily hold floodwater, but they will be an amenity improvement. To the concern that this makes parks unsafe, I think that talking to the residents who, when it rains, have their basements filled up, or they can only exit their homes by boat, or have no option but to enter floodwaters, it makes much more sense to have them contained in an area where temporarily people can stay away from. I think Alderman Healy has mentioned this during many meetings. There is not one fix, and that we've heard all the steps we've taken on the sanitary side and on the flooding side, and that this is one more step, but this one will reach a lot more people and have a greater impact than some of those other policies and initiatives that we have been working on. And this is one of the biggest decisions and the most impactful one of the most impactful ones that this council can make. I would encourage the council to support moving forward in our commitment to this, and I would urge our community members to continue to participate in the process as you have tonight. And I think that we have made a lot of progress, and I hope we continue to with our communications committee. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Levin.
Thank you, Mayor. I too am in support of this report. I don't believe the city has delayed in the stormwater issue in to any extent. It's certainly not a simple problem, and I think it would have been very fiscally imprudent if we had reacted in a knee-jerk fashion, had gone out and started spending millions of dollars just to start doing something. It was painful, and I know there are a number of people who've come to the Public Works Committee meetings, meeting after meeting, and have watched as our city engineers have gone through our hired engineers, and we hired one of the best around by reputation, actually two. And there was very careful analysis, planning, some give and take in terms of what could be done. I think the committee did a good job in parsing out into different components, different approaches. Some of them were referred out to other committees. And in the end, we've developed a plan. These components have started to move forward, and part of it was to look to other government districts, namely parks and schools. That was presented last year. I see nothing wrong with those governmental agencies hiring their own engineers. They have a responsibility to protect their lands and to protect their programs, while at the same time recognizing we're all one community, we're the same constituents, and I think we've now reached a point where we are working together, and they have a level of confidence that this is going to perhaps be beneficial to, in particular to the parks, and I'm pleased to have the participation of those districts as we move forward. I have had a number of people, and sometimes people say a lot of people have called you. Well, this is one of those issues where people really do call you, and I think there was starting to be a little bit of maybe the parks or schools were getting a bad rap because they were saying, well, why aren't they just doing it? And I would explain to them, it is a process, it takes time, they have to do their own analysis, and if it took a year, it took a year. That's where we are right now. As Alderman Healy does say to me with frequency, we're not going to solve the entire flooding problem. We don't have unlimited resources. We have other areas in the city that have to be budgeted to address. I think some of the emotions are not quite based in rational understanding. It's not we're taking something away from somewhere else and we could be solving the flooding. I think that we can't do all the projects at once. We've got to start out and let the school district and the park district see that we are going to do these tests, see that they work and progress, and it's going to take a number of years, but we're finally on the trail where I think we're going to get where we're going. It's not just updating our systems. We can't lay an infinite amount of pipe down to Salt Creek, and as been mentioned, we can't dump all our water into the creek. So there are a number of factors that go into this analysis. I think the Public Works Committee has put in, I know they've put in a very large number of hours, careful analysis, and I think they are the experts, and I have had the benefit of talking to a number of the committee members over time and getting an understanding of what's going on. I actually think this is one of the most transparently handled issues we've ever faced. It's no different from what I do. I look at the website. There are materials that are through 2013. I follow by looking at the Public Works Committee's materials to see what's ongoing. I've seen people who've attended the committee meetings and who've spoken to aldermen. It's all there, and I don't know if Public Works addresses any other issues, but I know that they certainly spent a lot of time on this one. And I guess two more points. One is, I'm not an engineer, but I rely on the engineers we hired. I rely on the Public Works Committee. I also want to make sure it makes sense to me, and I think they've come up with some good solutions. I'm sorry if the city didn't reach out to Cayuga. I know since it's Alderman Kennedy's own ward that you have to be extra careful, and Alderman Honquist too, but you're on the committee. So we can't guarantee it, but we can certainly, this isn't the end. As Alderman Kennedy said, this is a plan, and those concerns by the residents in Cayuga can be addressed as part of what we do going forward. But this is not just a knee-jerk reaction. This is a carefully thought-out plan. I'm glad to see we're going somewhere with it now. It makes sense, and I do support it.
Okay, Alderman Honquist?
Yes, I wanted to comment, since I'm the other 6th Ward resident here. And Alderman. Thank you, Jim. I'm also a Elmhurst baseball coach. I've done it for 5 years now. I've had 2 teams a year, which is why I don't have any hair left, and I'm doing this job. I've only been doing this for 1 year, but in the year that I've been here, this is probably one of the biggest and most important issues we faced. And it's been interesting in this job, all the things that create passions, like stop signs or building heights. This is something that affects a lot of people. And there's nothing worse, as we've heard from some of the people, and I've experienced myself, than waking up to a basement that's filling up with water. It's awful. You gotta run down, you gotta grab all this stuff, you gotta lift it all upstairs, you gotta spend 2 days cleaning out the basement. It's a horrible experience, nobody would want it. If you haven't experienced it and you want to, give me a call, we'll set something up with the fire department and we'll do a test, and you'll understand. It's awful. So, I want to make a couple of points. One is, no one is looking to do this to your commons to tear up that park. I use the park, I've coached on the park many times, or any other parks for that matter. I also have a deep respect for the park board and the school board. As I've learned in this job, there's a lot to learn. And in 1 year, I can't learn it all, they can't learn it all. There's a lot of issues that have to be determined. But we have spent a lot of time, I know Alderman Kennedy and the whole committee spent a lot of time working on this issue. It's not something we brought up 6 months ago or a year ago. It's something we actually shared with the other groups a year ago, and we've been working through it. If you read the materials and you spend some time, you understand there are other alternatives. There are always other alternatives, but this is the best alternative. That's why we're trying to move forward with this. And we're taking off one piece of it. We're not going after the whole city. This is the one that Alderman Kennedy and Alderman Palumsky work with the other committees to figure out what are the best spots to do this. So it's our goal to do this, number one, to get something started. One of the things I used to hear most often when I was a citizen and not alderman is, why does it take government so long to do it? We're trying to do something, and we're trying to do it now. And we like the support of the school board and the park board to do these projects now and move forward and see what we can do. It's definitely our goal to make sure that when we do these parks, we do them in a way that it's good for the neighborhood and that we can continue to use those parks. My kids have used both the parks all the parks we've talked about. So I feel everybody's frustration and concern on this, but this is the right first step to do this. It's not going to solve every problem. Nothing that Alderman Healy or anybody else has set up here, we've not positioned any one thing as the catch-all for all this. They're all steps to get better. So I hope that the community at large will get behind this. I hope everybody on the dais will get behind this. It's the right thing to do, and thanks for the time.
Any other comments? Alderman Bram?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to make this quick. I did not sign this report, and I want to explain why I didn't sign the report before any inaccurate conclusions come from or an assumption comes from why I didn't sign the report. These projects, I would like to believe, came from an initial referral that I did a while ago in regards to the comprehensive study, stormwater and sanitary study, which ended up in a Burke report and the RJN report. So I'm all for stormwater management and sanitary management within the city of Elmhurst. In our Public Works Committee meeting, I actually recommended that we've had a lot of intergovernmental discussions, but we haven't, as a council, as a body, said, here's something formal saying that this is the city of Elmhurst priorities, top, I'll say it a little bit different, top 1 priorities 4 times. The only concern that I had was that the philosophy of this report is based on 2 top number 1s from a joint partnership with the Park District and 2 top number 1s with a joint partnership with the school district. My philosophy was that the 4 priorities, 4 number 1 priorities, should be the 4 number 1 priorities no matter what governmental body we would be teaming up with. If that meant all 4 were teaming up with the Park District, then we would have 4 as the top number 1 priorities or pilot programs, pilot projects, or if it was vice versa, 4 for the school district, et cetera, down the line. It was mentioned in regards to the best possible cost as one of those criteria. And one of them, the one that's the last one in the top table of the 4 priority projects, pilot projects, Washington Street above ground storage behind Madison School, is a $208,000 cost per home, a total cost of $2.5 million, which would help, according to this table, approximately, of course, 12 number of homes and leave 51 still prone to flooding in a 100-year event. And if you look at the other table, which is below, there are projects that help the same, if not more, for the cheaper cost per home. I will pick one, as I did in the committee discussion, that's in my ward, which is Geneva Avenue, and that would be, again, teaming up with the Park District, but it would help 15 homes at a cheaper cost at $126,000 per home compared to the one that I just mentioned, helping 12 homes, 3 fewer, for $208,000, almost double the cost per home that we would help. I was initially thinking of doing a minority report for this and doing an amendment for this and seeing if we can replace the 1 partnership with the school district with an additional one with the Park District. But quite honestly, as I sit here and listen to other comments, I don't want to belabor this point anymore. I want to move forward. Even though I don't agree with the overall philosophy that we have in this recommendation, I agree with the strategy of moving forward with 4 projects, and I just want to send a note, at least for myself personally, to the 2 other governmental bodies. Just because there's 4 in this table being as proposed as pilot projects, I think that if they're so inclined, there's many down below that they should consider as well. And I think fiscally being responsible, there are ones that are more fiscally responsible for the city of Elmhurst to move forward with that would help more homes or equal to. But I'm going to sign on, per se, to this report so we can move forward and have an overall, I shouldn't say an overall, a start of an overall solution for stormwater management.
Alderman Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to commend the committee for what seems like probably a couple years worth of committee meetings. And that might have been just one single meeting. I don't know. But I would say just nice job to the committee. I think there's 2 things that I was thinking about as people were kind of giving their comments is the haste makes waste and perfection is rare. And this is not going to be a perfect process. But I do know that if we don't act tonight, a lot more people will just continue to flood. So it's a work in progress. There's a lot of design work that's got to still happen. We're not going to take a problem from Crescent and put it over on Cayuga. We're going to try to solve all this stuff tonight and moving forward. So I just, patience is a virtue. I'd say that's my 3rd one. And nice job to the committee again, and I support the report.
Any other comments or questions? Alderman Dunn.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I want to echo Alderman Wagner's comments on the committee's work and city staff. I think they've done an outstanding job of trying to get their arms around this extremely complicated issue. And this started when I was back on Public Works Committee. There was a lot of uncertainty where to start. It's such a big problem to tackle. And as Alderman Kennedy, Chairman Kennedy outlined, they took a very methodical approach to looking at sanitary, funding assessment projects to help prioritize, also implementing policies for storage, and now this action plan. I do have some concerns on the details of this action plan. The 100-year level is certainly pretty formidable. That's a high level of protection, and what I would like to see is some evaluation of 50 or 75 years to see what the cost differences are for those. We have identified 4 projects that are $12 million. That is $80,000 a home, and that's certainly a lot of money. And so certainly it's a big project, it's expensive projects. We have 4 projects recommended for 2015. That's a lot to tackle. They're targeted for next year. Looking at the entire report, just to point out, we do have about 500 or so homes identified on the whole report. That's about 3% of the homes in Elmhurst. Not insignificant. Those families, our hearts go out to them when they do flood, but something that we should be cognizant of. We're calling this a pilot project. It's certainly not a pilot project, in my opinion. Alderman Bram talked about the recycling project in downtown Elmhurst as a pilot project. That is a pilot project. We're playing around with an effort that's low dollar and seeing how it works and trying to expand it. This is a real deal. We're spending a lot of money on these particular projects, and so it's something I would look at as perhaps phase 1 of an effort. And also would like to be cognizant of potential cost share with some of the taxing bodies, because as was echoed by a few aldermen tonight, there is a lot of improvement that's being proposed to the facilities, and so that's a good thing for both bodies, but it's not out of the question that we would consider that. And with those concerns, I support the report because it is a preliminary plan of action that we're trying to get the ball rolling. It's a starting place, and I have confidence in the committee and city staff, the rest of council, to head us in the right direction to make sure, as was stated, we want to be cost effective with our investments, and I think this is a good start, these 4 projects, and there's a lot of details to work out, but I think we can make this happen and benefit all those homes on those streets. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Alderman Deuter, and then I'll go to Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mayor. I support the identification of these 4 initial projects. In that said, I just wanted to make one additional comment, and that is to encourage city staff and the committee to remain open to additional projects, alternative approaches, and opportunities. The projects that were considered in this prioritization process were included in Burke's original report. After last year's storm event, the city asked Burke to analyze 3 additional areas, 2 of which are in the 1st ward. We are still waiting for Burke's analysis and their recommendations related to these areas, and I would just ask that our approach to the stormwater improvement projects remains flexible enough to incorporate these additional recommendations when they are received.
Alderman Gutenkopf.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that I'm really heartened to hear so many positive comments from the dais, because what we're really doing tonight is directing the mayor and city staff to reach out to the two other elected bodies in the city to ask them for their assistance in moving forward with these projects, and to decide what project best suits their needs and their plans for their properties. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, that it isn't just the cost per home that helped us decide which 4 projects we were going to identify as a city. It also had to do with what seems to be the most feasible. What projects coming out of the communications committee, the school district and the park district, sounded like they were going to be the most willing to approach. So there's a lot of pieces that got pulled together to identify these 4 projects moving forward. So while there might be other projects we might have wished would have happened, I think these are the ones that are going to be the most practical. I think calling them a pilot project isn't a misnomer, because we need to go into the next engineering stage to understand what the impact is going to be and what these are going to cost. And identifying the 100-year storm, which isn't a phrase I particularly like, is appropriate, because as we've seen, we're not going to get less rain over time, and these rains aren't going to come less frequently. So I think it's important for us to identify the level at which we can afford to build. And we think that this 100-year storm is an appropriate level of protection to provide now, because we're getting hit with these size storms more frequently and not less frequently. So I'm heartened to hear that there's so much support, and I'm looking forward to your vote.
Very good. Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to take this opportunity again to just talk about managing expectations, and I'm happy to hear Alderman Palumsky, Alderman Levin, Alderman Honquist mention about my previous conversations or comments. I'm going to keep doing it because I think it's that important. And there's a lot of new faces in the audience tonight, and I make these same comments to a lot of different people, whether they live on Washington, Pine, Swain, Saylor, in the 5th Ward. But I think it's very important that we manage expectations. I hope, and I sincerely hope, that nobody thinks we can solve or fix a problem. It's just not going to happen. The best we can do is mitigate. And we've got to do as much as we can to mitigate the problem. And mitigation means, to me, holding water wherever we can, using open space wherever we can, wherever it makes sense, but do it responsibly, do it in a planned fashion. But we can do all of that. And the reality is, I think statistically, the April 2013 event was the worst one, 8 inches in 12-ish hours. That statistically was more rain than the 2013 events. When Mother Nature decides she wants to give us 9 inches in 12 hours or 5 inches in 3 hours, it doesn't matter what we do. It's going to flood, and the low-lying areas are going to take water. Washington Street is going to hold water. Our hope is to keep it, as I've said continuously, those last 6 inches from somebody's house. Same thing on Pine Street, Swain. That's just the reality of it. So I hate to sound like a downer, but it is what it is, and Mother Nature is always going to win. So we've got to manage expectations. We've got to do everything we can within reason, and spend appropriately. And I don't think there's anybody on this dais that's afraid of spending appropriately. But the reality is, there's going to be a rainstorm that we don't plan for, or that exceeds what we think we can handle. And that's just the reality of what's going on in this entire area. It's not an Elmhurst thing, it's not a Lombard thing, it's not a Downers Grove thing, it's this area. And we're all trying to deal with it best we can. But sorry to be long-winded, but I think it's very important that we keep those expectations in mind. We have to stop using the words solved or fixed and rely on mitigate, because that to me is very important. Thank you.
Okay, I think that wraps it up. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll ask Clerk Spencer to please call the roll.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Conquest.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Palumski.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Lipscomb, absent. York, absent. Levin.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, that motion passes. Before I go on to reports and recommendations, as council's aware, I usually don't opine on this kind of stuff, but this is an important, such an important issue that I wanted to take the opportunity after the vote just to thank the Public Works Committee for their hard work and their continued hard work. Anybody who's familiar with what Public Works has been doing really for the last 4 years, a solid 50 to 60% of their agenda every 2 weeks is on water, whether it's stormwater or sewer water or building. It's just been their life. And this is a big accomplishment for them. We appreciate I really do appreciate the hard work. Also, Alderman Kennedy and Alderman Palumski, I asked them a year ago to help me communicate with Parks and Schools, and they've done a terrific job in that sense and will continue to do so. And I appreciate their hard work on that. The other thing I wanted to note is we're a mature community. We don't have a lot of green space. I think that's pretty obvious from the Burke report. So much so that another report that was pulled and discussed a little bit tonight is the city is actually willing to pay for people to store water on private property. We don't have a farm next door that we can annex and dump water into. We are scratching for every bit of storage we can get. And I think that one policy, in addition to this one, this report, shows how serious we are. We're actually going onto private property and asking people to participate and paying them to do so. Last thing I'll say is I look forward to working with the parks and the schools and the neighborhoods as we move forward with these projects. I look forward to answering questions, working together on design, and moving this forward. So again, thank you everybody for your hard work. On to reports and recommendations. Agenda item 7, Mayor Morley, a couple of things to report. Sustainability Task Force that I announced a little bit ago. I'm very happy to say that we have somewhere between 35 and 40 applications. Spent the better part of a couple hours this morning with Alderman Palumski going over those and continue to do so. I expect I will name people to that task force within the next week or so. July 25th, a week ago Friday, is that right? We had the Elmhurst Cycling Classic. Elmhurst was fortunate enough, again, to host for the second time the Intelligentsia Cup Prairie State Cycling Series. I would say that we had probably double the crowd this year, and I'm looking forward to doubling the crowd next year. It was a fantastic event. It really showcases Elmhurst. Weather was fantastic as well. And I also want to thank a few people for making that possible. The Elmhurst Masters Competition Cycling Club, which was started by Tim Radcliffe, among others. He's really one of the folks who deserves a lot of the credit for bringing this bicycle race into town. Bob Hull with the Bike Task Force and Alderman Kevin York all participated. I want to thank them for their hard work. Final part of my report is the North York Plan. On July 30th, we had an open house. We were very, very pleased that we had over 60 people participate. The meeting consisted of an open house that displayed the concept boards for the main areas of the plan, and we took a lot of comments and questions from the public, and Housel Levine, the group that's helping us with that, helped answer questions and also take input. The next step of the process is for Housel Levine to incorporate all of the suggestions and feedback from the open house into a final draft, which will then move forward to the City Council for approval and then referring on to Zoning and Planning Commission. So, that's it for my reports. City Manager Grabowski.
One item tonight, the annual Joint Review Board meetings will be held August 11th, next Monday at 6 p.m. That's a change from when it's been in the past due to the change in the fiscal year. So those notices went out to all of our fellow agencies that participate in that. That is next Monday, 6 PM.
Okay. Any other reports?
That is for the 4 TIF districts.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I was reminded that I should expand on it. That's for the 4 TIF districts in town. It's an annual meeting of all the taxing bodies which are a part of that.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Any other reports? Seeing none, we'll move on to other business. Any other business? Alderman Braham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure about this one, if it belongs under the business or not. For Public Affairs and Safety, there was a agenda item, I don't know the exact agenda terminology, there was trolley service. And I see that in the committee wrap-up, it said that that discussion was going to be forwarded to the city manager for, I assume, a decision process. My request or recommendation would be that would follow, since it was originally on the agenda for Public Affairs and Safety, that follows the typical process unless there is a reason why we would not go through city council for an item like that.
Okay, I know that that was discussed. There was some discussion about additional follow-up with city manager, and I know Chairman Wagner and the city manager are working on that. So, no decision, final decision has been made, and would expect it to go back to committee if that happens.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any other business? Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank fellow members of Public Works, the other members of the City Council, and especially the residents that have put a lot of effort and hard work into making sure that stormwater and sanitary projects were high on our list, with this effort culminating tonight, which really means we've just gotten to the point where we have a whole lot more work to do going forward. So thank you to all. It's been a lot of work, but we got a lot more to do. Thanks.
Fantastic. Okay, anything else? Motion to adjourn. Alderman Gutenkopf, second by Alderman Healy. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.